So then, this is to me like the highlight. I mean, everything was a highlight, but Robert Erskine.
Erskine.
Erskine. I don't want to
Erskine.
say Robert. It's Robert Erskine. Usually that's the. Then it was Robert Erskine. So Robert, I will pronounce your name Erskine. I got it. Not Wanakee, but Wanakee.
Exactly.
Robert Erskine. Okay, so we take the investigation from the Hewitts. We come into the cemetery, and this was a long time coming for you, Kim. You wanted to have this one-on-one with Robert for a while. So I'm going to let you kind of intro this, and we'll take it away.
Yeah, so I had been to the property a year before and was researching stuff that had to do with mine managers and mine owners. So that's what led me to Ringwood Manor, because there's a long history of the iron industry in that area. And I didn't really know that there was a cemetery there. Like, I didn't really know anything. But going down, I was like, oh, there's these two tabletop graves. And I was like, oh, wow. So I hadn't been back there in a year, but with all of our research and all of our historical information, especially when we went to Jockey Hollow, especially in looking up stuff for Hog's Pen, this gentleman is the one who did the map making of those maps of those places. So even the maps of Hog's Pen, Rich, those were done by Robert Erskine. And the maps of Jockey Hollow, they were done by Robert Erskine. So it was one of these things that he's kind of just been on the periphery, and I was so excited to finally actually have a moment and see if we could communicate with him, and it did not disappoint. Where do I want to start with this? So there's a long time legend of the household of the Hewitts that General Robert Erskine does walk the property, to the effect that a lot of the workers or slaves at the time, they actually specifically said slaves, would not walk by his grave after 9 p.m. because they were afraid that they were going to encounter him. Mm-hmm. And there's a legend that he walks with a blue lantern down that path that we were walking to that bridge, and stops. And then he won't go over the bridge. So I thought that was so interesting that not only do we feel like we felt something that was related in that area, but people 100 years ago have also experienced something in that area enough that they wanted to avoid it. So Mrs. Hewitt, the mother, replaced a brick on his grave, and they say that after the brick was replaced, his presence was not as prominent, so that he was kind of appeased and wasn't really as active in the property or in the grave site any longer. So I thought that was really interesting that, you know, not only today do we feel like he was able to be there for us, but he seems to have a long-term, hundreds of years presence in that area by his grave. So he came over in 1771. He was a trained engineer. He was not a trained surveyor. He was a trained engineer, and he was brought over to replace Hashenclaver. Thank you, Marcy. Maybe I did. Because he was in trouble. So they're like, we need a new person to manage Ringwood Manor, not the manor, Ringwood Ironworks. We need somebody here. So they brought him over. So at that point in time, he was really loyal to the British. He was not a loyal colonist at that time. He was paid on the royals' dime. And he managed the place. He increased the wealth. And then at that time, not a few years later, the colonists started, you know, the Revolutionary War. And at that point in time, yeah. And at that point in time, he did declare to be a part of the colonists, but he was still getting paid by Britain, which I think is really interesting. So he felt, like I kind of said, he felt like he had no choice in the matter. He really felt like he was kind of being pushed into a corner of having to declare this, he created his own militia. And that picture that you showed of the garb is actually the militia colors that he ordered for his militiamen. So they were green jackets, and I guess blue pants, which is fashionable, but
Yeah, I mean, this is how you wanted to dress back then.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he was actually recommended originally to be the engineer for Washington, but for some reason that didn't happen. So then he was recommended to be the map surveyor, and that position he did take. And he surveyed, as we know, a bunch of the area. And at one point on one of his excursions, it is said that he caught a cold and died from pneumonia at the age of 45.
And General Washington even attended his funeral there at the manor, which was really big for somebody in his service.
Yeah, he did. He was really important to the war. His maps were instrumental in getting a surveying of the land, of defenses, and what was actually out there. So he was really, really instrumental. He was married. He did have a wife. They didn't have any children that survived past 2 years. But he was married, and they both lived on that property. And he died on the property, and he was buried next to his apprentice, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and he was Scottish. I couldn't find any description about his like physical features, but he was Scottish. And they did say that he was a part of like the strong Scotsman bloodlines. So I'm guessing he was kind of a bigger guy, but I'm not quite sure.
So are we talking about what Jamie from Outlander looks?
I think so, yeah.
Picture, right? He has that, like, you know.
Yeah, yes.
Rough and gruff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
500. Yeah. So then from the reading and picking up stuff there, we had to, I mean, this has been a vital tool for our investigating since like the beginning is the Phasma box.
Yeah, that thing was absolutely incredible.
All three of us were asking questions, and all three of us amazingly had a conversation with a man who's been dead for a long time.
Yeah.
The conversation with like Robert and how much feedback that we got to our questions is just mind-blowing, and especially that they're answers that make sense. So anything before we get into the what Marcy did was she went back, she watched episode 3. So we're asking you, watch episode 3. Marcy's going to give you numbers at times to watch for these words that come through from Robert Erskine.
So again, if you're going back to episode 3, please understand a little bit of history for me. My husband was in the Army for almost 24 years, so I'm retired military spouse, and my husband is a military historian. So when I go and I know that there's military, he was a general, so I made sure I called him sir, and I think that brought out a lot of the military connotations. So I said, General Erskine, I'm going to say it wrong, are you here? And he goes, here. And I said, oh, thank you for talking to us. And it said roll call. So that's something that you would do for duty or muster roll. You would call roll to make sure that everybody was lined up and present before you started to go out on your mission. So that was at 6:52 we got here, and at 6:54 we got roll call. So a few seconds later at 7:38, we got corrected by how we were pronouncing his name. It is a short I. It's Erskine. So I talked to my husband afterwards, and I told him how we were pronouncing. My husband's like, it's Erskine. I'm like, how would I know? I said, well, there he goes. He corrected us. And it's very deep. It says Erskine. And I'm like, thank you. So after that, you see about 8:14, Kim and I are whispering about Washington, if you remember that conversation. And it says General Washington. with a question in there. And I thought that was really funny, something I just captured this morning looking at it again. And about 8:32, I said, General Erskine, still at that point in time, but Erskine, will say it right, thank you for your service. And then it says, thank you. And then it says, welcome. And I thought that was really interesting. And also, Kim had asked how old he was. Kim didn't know at this point in time how old he was. She had said, 49, 45. And it said 45, whispered, at 8:50. So it was a confirmation. And the tombstone does say age 45 and 25 days, 45 years and 25 days. So it's total confirmation there. It's incredible.
And it's very clear, too. And
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing came through crystal clear. 45 is very audible.
Very, very audible. Very quiet, but very audible. And then right after that, Kim says, I feel him standing on my left-hand side. And you can hear, I see you. So, again, that's another really cool capture. And then we asked, are you tall? And it said yes. And then we said, are you short? And it said no. And I thought the funniest thing is Kim said, do you like riding horses? And it said no. And we it was just like, no. Like, I don't know if it was because of the stature or anything, but it was so funny.
Well, just think, this man rode a lot of horses all
lot of
over.
horses.
So it's probably like, did you like doing it? No, you know?
No, and it was kind of like, no. It like, you could sense the humor. I mean, Kim said he was talking about the horses and, he was laughing at himself, this big man riding on these little horses, and you could just hear that humor in the voice with this. So I just thought it was very interesting and very endearing for me to be able to capture all that. And there is also one point in time we're talking about the map making, and we hear detailing downtown, and we talk about not documenting the Native Americans, and you do hear, I have to go back and try to find out when, but it does say Lenni Lenape in there. So he more than likely did run into some of the tribes. And I think he really took pride in keeping that secret where they were.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I also love the fact that he brought up the horses, like one of the first communications, like the first thing he brought up to me was about riding the horses, and it does really feel like he probably did spend so much time on horseback in the forest, and I can't imagine it being comfortable or enjoyable.
And it couldn't have been an enjoyable. I mean, he was looking at uncharted territory.
Right.
So it's not like a lot of this was roads, and so just look at North Jersey and picture a man just going through there, overgrown trees and shrubbery, mapping everything and what was at stake.
Yes, absolutely. For him to actually, even though he's still getting paid by England, he was one of the proponent keys of, helping us win the war for our independence. So it was greatly appreciated, and he was a hero.
And his maps live on. I mean, you said that a few times there, Kim. I mean, we're still looking at his maps.
Yeah, and there's supposedly around, I think the number I read was about 275 maps of his.
There's 275 maps, and they're actually located in New York City. They're on display and kept in a museum there.
The Cooper Hewitt Museum, maybe, or.
Yeah, and those are the ones that survived. I mean, who knows how many he actually? I mean, how many he made that didn't survive. I don't even know how much time it would have taken for him to write one map. I mean,
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
They're so detailed.
And when you look at his age too, 45 years old, he did all that in such a small time frame, and he died at 45. It's almost like a Hamilton story where Hamilton did all this writing, and didn't have a long life. So it's almost like he did a lot for the time that he was alive.
Yeah, he was really only in the United States for 9 years.